Previously, so today's the day. Start the strip down, see what's actually wrong with it, and then fix it. All this is still in the bike. Nice lump of flint in there. Looks to be some vegetation. I'll go with kale. I'd like to point out how bad this was, because underneath the tank, near the carbs, there's actually a piece of flint, like wedged in here. Now we've attacked the front quite aggressively, we can move on to the rear. As you can see, that rear panel has quite a big hole in it near the shock mount. But the first thing we need to address is the rear rack. It's bent completely out of shape, so it needs taking off, straightening out, and then a bit of welding to add some extra support. Now that the bike's all stripped down to this stage and the parts are laid out nice and neatly, we can start looking at the bearings. The first thing we're going to do is go to the back and check the back wheel and the swing arm. That's what we're going to do, is just get down here, grab the wheel at the top and bottom, push with this hand, pull with that hand, and kind of rock the wheel on the spindle. And that actually feels all right. So move on to the swing arm now. Grab the swing arm, hold the frame still. And I can't feel any movement in there, so that's good. Signed off on the back, just check the front wheel and the headstock bearing as well now. Coming to the front, what we've got to do is get this front end off the ground. To do that, I've got some bricks, so I'm just going to place one underneath the front wheel. So just lift this a little bit, wedge that under there. That gives us space under here to grab another rock, put that in there. We can put a brick on top of that, lower this down. Now that's off the ground, we've got free movement at the front wheel. It's turning without touching the ground. All we can do now is move these bars from lock to lock to see if there's any notches in the bearing. And there doesn't feel like there is any. Like that seems to move quite smoothly. The other check we can do is move down to the front wheel, grab hold of the forks, and then try and rock it. Try and rock the forks, so that way and this way, to see if there's any play that way. So doing that now, and I can't feel anything which isn't the bike moving by itself. So I'm going to sign off the head race bearing as being all right. Moving on to the front wheel now. We come down here and grab the wheel, the top and bottom, and then try again, move it on this spindle. Okay, so there's a tiny amount of slop in that front wheel bearing. Now that we've assessed all the bearings, what I'm going to do is just start taking the forks off. in theory, what I'm doing here is just getting the forks, rolling them along the countertop, because in theory the countertop is flat, dead flat, and the forks should be dead straight as well. So if they roll along smoothly with no gap underneath, it means they're straight. If, however, I see a gap underneath, I know they're bent and they need replacing. That's the theory. Hopefully it works out. Okay, we're back from the lab and we've got the results back. The forks, in my opinion, are straight. They still function properly. Yep, that feels like forky fork. Not good enough to eat spaghetti with, but good enough to dampen out some bumps. Anyway, these forks can now go back in the bike after a little bit of a clean. I know it's not the most important job in the world at the moment, but as I'm here, there's all this heated grip wiring which could just come off because I don't use them that much and it's summer now, so I can always put them on in the winter, but for now, just in the way, and it will make everything a little bit more easy. So here's an interesting development. I took this apart. Just testing the cables to see if any of those are damaged. Like, one of them seems fine, but as you may notice, this one's a little longer than usual. So we pulled that out. Broken. Luckily we have a spare of that cable, so that's not going to cost anything. But what might cost us a bit is this. It's a snapped throttle tube. So we'll see if we can find another one of those kicking about. Anyway, it did look a little bit worn, so not the end of the world. The damping on these isn't great, they are just factory shocks, but you don't need anything special on a bike like this. Oh, hello. This spring is bent, so I'll bring you around. But this spring, instead of being like this, it's actually bent that way. This piece of rubber inside's collapsed as well. So I think, what if we can just pull that? No. Twist it round. I see a big problem with this shock. There's a crack there. A very big crack that goes right the way through that spring. So this shock is a write-off, which means we've got to find a pair of shocks because you can't just replace one. That's a pain. So that brings us quite nicely to the end of part one. We've stripped down the bike to a stage where I think it needs to go to. I mean, we've checked the front forks, they're nice and straight. We haven't checked the front wheel, but I want to see if I can just correct it with the wheel bearings rather than going the whole hog and buying a wheel to see if that works. Because it could, the little wobble it's got could just be the bearings. It might not actually be that it's buckled. So we'll do the cheapest fix first, and if that fails, we'll get the new wheel. The cheapest fix is actually free because I already had the bearings sitting at the back of the garage. So that's a good thing. Next up, we've got that rear shock to sort out. We've got to try and source two new shocks, second hand hopefully. A throttle tube. It's all coming along now. Now that I've actually assessed the damage and taken apart what a lot of it is, I think this is very much fixable, and we just need to get the parts and get them on the bike. So the rest of the day will be on eBay, Amazon, Facebook, trying to find a good deal on some parts. And once I've got those, then there'll be part two. So if you like this kind of thing, please subscribe. There's a lot more things to be done on this bike, and yeah, you'll enjoy it, I promise. Hopefully. Anyway, see you next time.